understand the mystery. First take a look at the history. The words we use will give us clues. So join us now in Church Chatter. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Church Chatter podcast, where we unpack a different church word or phrase each week. I'm Sam. I study Christian language and culture.
And I'm Dillon. I'm an ELCA Lutheran pastor. What's the word today?
It's episode 44. We're talking about the word pious. Let me light our candle. I usually have this ready, but I don't today. Light our candle. So I just got out of the shower and didn't really do my hair, and I'm really regretting it, but here we are.
I think it looks great.
I should have done this before the episode started, but my desk feels cluttered and I can't function. Okay. All right, episode 44.
Here we are.
It's August 5th when we're recording that. And I know that some people aren't going to like this. But I feel like August is fall. You disagree.
Totally.
But I'm ready for pumpkin and apple and ghost mugs.
Oh, I'm ready for it.
I'm even into my fa la 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 mug. Because for me, it's just like, once August hits, it's like Halloween, fall, Thanksgiving, Christmas. It's like all the holidays. Here we go.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm.
We could talk off screen.
Okay, so the word is pious, and this is a word that Dillon has been but bringing up. He's been bringing it to the committee. We're the committee.
We're the committee.
He's been bringing it up a lot, and we're finally doing it. Why do you like the word pious? Why, not that you like it, why are you interested in the word pious or piety so much?
I'm interested in it because in many ways, I had a family that, whether or not they knew it,
slash know it,
they are a product of pietism, which is the movement, and they are a product of pietistic practices in their religiosity, in their spirituality. And so I grew up really pious.
Yes, you did.
In a pious household, particularly on my mother's side of the family.
Now, we're going to talk about this, but the word pious has kind of picked up negative connotation. It's not negative the whole way through.
No.
Anything, there are problematic aspects to it, but it's not a bad thing.
No, it can be quite beautiful.
Yeah.
Unless it gets rigid.
Well, like always, I've got my notes. So let's talk about it. All right.
Okay.
As always, it's related to the Roman Empire. So let's talk about why. So it comes to English from Latin. It just really broadly, it just means dutiful, respectful towards gods, and loyal to your country. Right, so it has this like God and country thing, which we're going to talk about, kind of a through line, which is really interesting because God and country in the United States, we see that connection a lot, and sometimes it's very like, what? How did we get here? But there's actually, like, pietism has kind of always had this nation and the gods together.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. So, if you know who Virgil is,
I do.
A poet. He had
a Roman poet,
yes. He had this, I have a lot of notes here, so bear with me, but he had this poem, and he had Pious Aeneas, right, who was a hero in Greek and Roman mythology, and he was called pious because he put duty over self-interest, and that's like the common theme of pietism. It's putting duty over self-interest. I care about something. And Dillon and I come from very different families, and at the end we're going to talk about this like pietism thing. I don't have a very pious family. I don't have like a debt, duty, obligation family, right? But this became this kind of Roman ideal, right? Virgil had this poem. He named somebody pious. I'm not saying that's the origin of the word,
No,
but
right.
it really
Yeah,
just
right.
kind of signifies, this is a really meaningful poem in that culture. And it signifies like in Roman culture, pietism was a huge ideal. You were loyal to the gods and you were loyal to your nation. And of course, the Roman Empire, you want people to be loyal to your nation, to the empire, the same way they are loyal to the gods. By the way, that's why the Caesars were called Son of God, right? It's why they were called saviors. It's why they had divine status. So it arrived in English then directly from the Old French around the 14th century, like a lot of these words have. And it was really Roman political propaganda. I've been reading a lot about propaganda, so I'll be using that word a lot. Yeah. But it was political propaganda because emperors had this title, Pious or Pious, right, to convince people that they were devout to the gods. So, for example, there was Antoninus Pius, right? So this pious word was added to his name to signify that, like, I am pious, I have piety, I am loyal to the gods, I have divine status myself even, and you should be loyal to the empire, you should be loyal to the nation. So again, this loyalty to gods, and then later on God because of monotheism, but loyalty to the gods and to your empire or your nation, right? Or to your country. I just think that's really interesting.
Yeah.
So, anything to add so far?
No, that's all very.
Got a little more to go. So,
all very good.
Roman religion, we also have to remember, was like, we have separation of church and state. It's a blurred line these days, but it's there, right? And Roman religion was state sanctioned, like, right? It was centered, like you almost couldn't separate them. In fact, throughout
in much of the ancient world,
right? Throughout history,
it was not separate.
You can't just study religious history because religion is history. Like, if you can't understand history if you don't understand people's relationship to religion, and even that kind of puts religion out here. Religion was the center of everything, of identity, all of it. So the God and country connection, and really the main point is civic duty and religious duty in this pious culture were one and the same.
Right.
When you were out doing something religiously, like worshiping, you worshiped the emperor, right? That was civic duty, so you could participate in commerce, but it was also religious duty. You were worshiping. Those things were all together.
Yeah, and the emperor was a close mediator or intercessor between the masses, the people, and the gods themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you weren't in connection with the empire and the emperor, you might be lacking connection with the gods.
Right, exactly, yeah. So that is the Roman world 2,000 plus years ago. And then obviously they still were in charge during Jesus' lifetime. Jesus died, yada, yada, yada. A few hundred years later, Constantine comes in. It's still the Roman Empire, but Constantine is credited, rightfully so, with formalizing Christianity. Now, Christianity has officially entered the scene. And during this time, piety became less about civic duty. It was, to help me word this better, it wasn't a separation of government and religion necessarily, but it was the first time that piety wasn't really about civic duty. It was about inner devotion.
Yeah, it was about personal piety,
Yes.
one's relationship with the divine.
Yes, yeah. So essentially, inner devotion and prayer became connected with piety rather than outward civic engagement.
One could say this wouldn't be directly in the ancient manuscripts, but this connection between humanity and the divine in a pietistic way would be kind of having a personal connection. So your piety, your daily and weekly piety, it is a personal connection between you and the divine.
Yeah.
And there were things that helped you connect. We'll probably talk about more of those things.
Yeah. So then fast forward a little more during medieval times, so medieval Christianity, essentially, just really simply put, piety it started to be viewed with suspicion because when people were pious or like praying and doing devotions, it was seen as false sometimes, or
It
like
was
for
kind of
show.
a fake phony fraud.
Yeah, a fake phony fraud. And sometimes rightfully so.
Sure.
People were doing it to, as they have been for all of history. Even Jesus says pray in private, right? All these
Well,
things. So like,
and
don't do it just to seem pious. But during the medieval Christian era, especially, not medieval Christian, but medieval era of Christianity,
yeah.
it really was viewed with suspicion, and it really kind of picked up this negative context.
Well, and sometimes an over exuberant piety. You also see this in the teachings of Jesus. I think of in Matthew's gospel when Jesus is talking about prayer, fasting, and almsgiving, which we now connect to the season of Lent. It's actually one of the readings to begin Lent on Ash Wednesday. Jesus says, "Don't be like the hypocrites who parade themselves through the streets and tell you that they're fasting, and don't be like the hypocrites who don't let your right hand know what your left hand is giving in terms of alms. Don't go around telling people that you're fasting, and don't go around doing long prayers."
Yeah.
So this kind of outward piety can be
right, which is interesting
kind of
how
icky,
quickly,
kind of
yeah,
icky.
it quickly became something that you did externally to something that you do internally, but other people didn't like whenever it was seen external. And then fast forward to like the Enlightenment, scientific revolution, right,
we'll
and
get
all of
into
these
that.
things, and piety now really became seen. How do I want to say it? It was seen with judgment heavily, and we still see that today. Just Enlightenment and beyond. I know that myself, I have, when I see someone who appears kind of pious, like at a restaurant praying before they eat and like making it. Now, when people make it really noticeable, it's like, oh, God, right? It's in the water. I'm not proud of that thought, but it's true.
No,
it's like,
sure.
Come on, like, are you kidding me?
Right.
You just want everyone to see it, or like all those kinds of things.
But then some people are doing it very genuinely.
Yes, for sure. It's a me issue. Even myself, though, there's this negativity attached to pietism. I have a cross necklace that I'll wear once in a while, and it's a subtle, tiny cross, but sometimes I'm like, oh, I don't think the word pious, but I have that feeling of like, ugh.
Sure.
Like, oh, people are going to think I'm like, oh, look at me. So pietism.
But there's also people that are wearing crosses and they have no idea the connection.
Yes, for sure.
They just like jewelry.
Yeah, and a cross has become kind of this just general cultural thing.
Yeah.
So that kind of brings us to modern day. You have more to talk about with Enlightenment?
Yeah, kind of.
I just gave a quick history
Oh
of
yeah,
pietism.
no, the rooting of the word. That's good stuff. An interesting thing started to happen during the Age of Reason or Enlightenment, 1600s, 1700s, early to mid 1800s. Some push it up to the 1900s, so a couple of decades. But you really start to see the pietistic or the pietism movement kind of explode in Northern Europe. Specifically, which is fascinating to me, specifically in the Lutheran Church. And you start to see this in the late 1600s, and then moving fully into the 1700s. Go ahead.
Related to like witch trials? Is that pietism or no?
No.
Okay.
No.
I don't know
that's
why.
That's kind of a separate.
When I think of pious, I think of like
Pilgrims.
New England, and I think of pilgrims, and I think of I think of witch trials.
The Puritans are not. How could I say this?
They're not pious.
They're not pious, but they come out of the Church of England.
Okay.
And Anglicanism.
So there's a loose connection.
So there's
there.
a loose
Maybe that's
connection.
What I'm
there is.
Grasping. Okay.
There is. There's a loose connection. But what was happening in Northern Europe in the 17th and 18th centuries was there was state churches. So the state was running the churches. The clergy were paid by the state, and the churches were run by the government. So you had clergy who were government employees, And you had churches that were established by the government, right? So in many of the northern countries, in Germany and Denmark and Sweden and Finland and Norway, all up in those kind of areas where Lutheranism is very, very prominent, you had state churches. And what was happening in those churches was people would come and they would get their children baptized as a baby. And then they wouldn't come to church ever again until their child needed to be confirmed and receive communion. Now, in those days, you didn't get communion when you were little. You were baptized, then you waited a long time, and then you went through confirmation, and at the end of confirmation, you were confirmed and you were given communion. And what was happening was people were using the state church as kind of a transactional thing. It's like, well, as long as we check the boxes, as long as we get our children baptized, as long as
what centuries are you talking about?
We're talking about the 17th and 18th century.
Very post-Enlightenment.
Very post-Enlightenment. So as long as we do the three things, baptism, confirmation, and communion, everybody's safe.
The process.
The process of it. And the church...
It's the same thing in my college classes today.
Yeah.
Students think, as long as I do these big assignments,
yeah,
the rest doesn't really matter.
So the church really focused on those three things. And Christmas and Easter. People would come to church, right? But there was no real spiritual connection. It was kind of, again, this like transactional. And so many people, many clergy and many non-clergy in these northern European countries started to understand, no, the Christian life is just that. It is about a life of faith. It's not just about checking the boxes or coming on Christmas and Easter. And that's really what the state church promoted. It promoted very high intellectual thinking, which isn't bad, and checking the boxes. But there was no real Christian life cycle. And so what happened was pietism started to become a thing in Lutheranism. So groups started to put more emphasis on more Bible studies, studying the scriptures intellectually, but studying the scriptures among the laity, among people who were...
And that was pious because...
You were reading...
It was like a devotion.
It was a devotion and an inner devotion in a group, and you were really...
Was it called... So it makes me think of the word fundamentalist. No group is calling themselves a fundamentalist. It's a label that's put on others by outsiders. Pious feels the same way. I know that the Roman Empire kind of claimed that term, and we're proud of it. But in the past few centuries, it really feels like that's a term we give to others, not something like people wouldn't say, I'm pious.
Yeah, most people who are pious probably,
or groups or denominations,
probably err on the more conservative side, but not all of them are fundamentalists.
But I'm saying some groups would claim that
some group.
word, like I'm pious.
Yeah. Well, or they would say maybe they're from a pietistic tradition.
Interesting, okay.
Right. So they emphasize more Bible studies among the laity, and then active living. So living the tenets of Jesus and being fully transformed, having like a conversion experience. Like making a decision to follow Jesus. Outside of confirmation, which was so they would still get their children confirmed, or they would be confirmed.
So in Lutheran history is choice theology.
Well, no, and because pietism becomes its own thing. I'm going to explain this.
Me. Okay. So what I really appreciate about Dillon, we're going to take a little side thing here. If you haven't noticed, I like history. And Dillon does a better job at bringing it into the current day. And when I started studying Christian language and culture, I thought I wanted to study current ways that people, and I tried with my dissertation, I want to study how people what people mean when they say the blood of Jesus saved me.
Sure.
Like what does that mean to people? How would they explain that? Or I have a personal relationship with Jesus, right? Like, what are you saying? But then the more I learned over the years, the more I realized, no, I actually like studying the history of Christian language more, because history that has already happened feels nailed down. So it feels like I can take it's not fleeting, it already happened. Do you know what I mean? It's still. It's in the past and it's sitting still, and I can go and I can look at it and I can wrestle with it and I can take my time. But to study current day stuff, it feels like a butterfly on the move. Like I can't grasp it. Current culture stuff with Christianity, I can't understand it. I can't look at it from all angles in a way that it feels like rushed and anxious to me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So I like that you're able to talk about like more modern
Yeah,
stuff.
and when I'm talking about more modern, though, I'm talking about like the 1670s,
right?
The early 17 and 1800s. So like
that feels modern.
I'm talking about like I'm talking about like about 30 to 40 years of a span of time.
Yes.
From the 1600s to the 1800s.
Yes. The past 500 years to me feel current.
Sure. Okay. Well, that's
I like
good.
like 2,000 to 3,000 years ago.
Oh,
anyway, keep going. Because what you're talking about bleeds into today. I guess.
Yeah. So there was a Lutheran pastor. He was German, actually, and his name was Philip Jacob Spencer. And Philip Jacob Spencer was one of these Lutheran pastors in Germany in a state church that saw that there was a lack of emotion among the people. They were kind of coming in and just rigidly doing what they needed to do, and there was no real Christian life going on outside of either coming to church on a Sunday or just going through the motions of milestones or life passages. And so in I think it was like 75 or something like that, Pastor Spencer, this German Lutheran pastor, outlined these 4 things to emphasize more Bible studies among the laity, to be more active in Christian living, and to have a kind of a moral transformation of one's life. And then for pastors to be more concerned about the spiritual life of people, like what's going on in your own life, asking the questions of like, what are you struggling with? What is going on? So that, and then a more personal or emotional connection to religious experiences of one's own self, focusing on those 3 things.
So is this where someone's personal relationship with Jesus really came out of? Okay.
No, because they were still connected to the sacraments.
So to community.
It was still community. And they emphasized the both and. So it was paralleled.
Is personal relationship with Jesus part of the Jesus movement?
Yeah, that's much later. That comes in the 60s and 70s.
Okay.
Not anywhere near what we're talking about.
Well, someday we'll do an episode on that phrase, but I don't know. I still need to read about it. But yeah, go ahead.
So then what happened, though, is for about a couple decades, this pietism lived within these state Lutheran churches in Germany and Scandinavia and whatever. But then what started to happen was other Lutheran pastors and theologians in these state churches said, we need to put a stop to this pietistic or pietism movement. This is not Lutheran. So they started to kind of weed out this kind of emotional, connected, they kind of stopped having lay groups just do Bible studies. Even though they were doing them in community, they stopped it.
You're painting a picture of Lutheranism as very stoic and unemotional.
Yeah, and there was a reaction to that by both clergy and laity during these couple of decades here. So it went on for a couple decades with pietism, and then in the state churches in Europe, particularly Northern Europe, it was like stamped down, trampled on. So, but what happened was, so the Lutheran Church kind of cleaned itself up. and went more back to Stoicism. But then what ended up picking up was you start to see pietism explode in the Moravian Church. And the Moravian Church is in the eastern part, the central eastern part of Europe, right? You see the Moravians, even today, the Moravians are typically a more liberal or inclusive mainline Protestant denomination, except they really, really focus on people's personal living. They do it in community, but it's about kind acts of love and gesture towards others.
Right. And again, as we're talking about pietism, remember it's debt, duty, obligation.
Yes.
So it's not. Yeah, we'll talk about the pros and cons of it.
And so there's that. So the Moravian Church really picks it up. And another one that really picks up pietism, when the Lutherans kind of put it aside, was the Methodists. And the Methodists come out of the Church of England. And John and Charles Wesley were really, really emphasized on a more emotional connection.
Yes, when I think of pietism, I also think of Methodists.
Yes, and living one's Christian life in a pietistic way. Again, not necessarily individually, in community, but kind of the duty that we have.
And a certain simplicity and frugality to life.
Frugality.
Because again, self-interest is just like, no, get that out of here. And like pleasure, no thank you. It's a lot of like...
vanity is not a big thing, so not wearing fancy clothes makeup or things like that. And there are a couple of, you also see this in the Brethren movement, and the Brethren movement comes out of more, I'm really throwing a lot of like words and jargon around here, but the Brethren movement comes out of what's called the Radical Reformation, so the Anabaptist movement, but they are very, very steeped in this kind of pietistic movement and also pietist practices.
Yeah, side note, if you're interested in books and publishing, there's a book coming out very soon. I forget the author's name, but it's called something like Why We Need the Black Church and Anabaptist Church.
Yeah.
And I'm really excited to read it.
Yeah.
Because Anabaptists are a group. I know a decent amount about the Black Church, but the Anabaptist Church, I don't know much about that lineage.
Sure.
Which will be interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The interesting part about this pietism or pietistic movement in the United States, especially in Northern America, in Canada, and the United States, European Christians who came over from Europe, especially during this time in the 16th, 17th, and 1800s, in those 30-year span of time, they brought their pietism with them. So when you see a lot of Lutherans and Methodists and Moravians in this country, there is still some remnants of pietist practices. My family comes out of one of those traditions, the Reformed tradition, a Union Church, Lutheran and Reform. That's what my parents came out of, and then they moved into evangelicalism, which has its whole other emphasis on pietism, but in a little bit of a different way. And so what they brought it with them. So through migration, pietism came to the United States and Canada, and still kind of has remnants within some of the mainline traditions. Not necessarily a bad thing, but can be a little bit kind of like more holier than thou type practices, like I'm more kind, I'm more giving, I practice being a better servant. Here's the thing.
People are proud about being humble.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's the thing that I won't end on, but I'll close out my little section with this. At its root, pietism or pious practices aren't bad and don't have to be bad. They actually could be quite helpful. If you're a Lutheran, like I am, and a Lutheran pastor, pietism places a lot of emphasis on what you can do as an individual to make God like you more, perhaps,
Yeah.
or make society better. Now, that's not a bad thing, but it really, really blurs the lines between something called works righteousness.
Yeah.
And the Lutheran Church, whether it's a Lutheran state church or a Lutheran church that is not a state church, which would be like unestablished, Lutheran theology is very, very clear that works righteousness is not something that the Lutheran Church believes in, meaning that we believe that it's all about what God has done for us, particularly in Jesus Christ, and not what we have to do to earn God's love or favor or forgiveness or grace. So it doesn't have to be a bad thing, but if you go like real wild with pietism, you start to blur the lines between, are you trying to be a goody two-shoe for God, or is it that God, you know what I mean?
That's actually a beautiful segue.
There's some
few minutes.
There's some questions.
Everything. Okay, I'm really excited. This is the part I've been wanting to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Dillon and I have talked extensively about this. Even just today, we were talking about frugality and all of these things.
Like one does
Actually,
on a
This is a conversation
Tuesday.
As one does. This is a conversation Dillon and I have. It's one of the through lines of our home life, of something we talk about over and over and over and over again. We're trying to negotiate who we are as two very different people coming together. I don't like debt, duty, obligation. I do not like that posture. I think it's very problematic. Dillon comes from debt, duty, obligation. And Dillon has a martyr complex sometimes, and I hate it. I hate it so much. I'm going to give an example. And it's okay if you want to call me out too. But today, we made homemade cheeseburgers and homemade French fries. Dillon wanted to buy a bag of French fries. I said, I'm not eating a frozen bag of French fries so we can cut up. We have an air fryer. I'm not eating like processed, I don't even know what it is. It's not potatoes. I'm not eating that.
I was hoping, real quick, I'm going to interrupt. I was hoping for like those like curly fries with like the seasoning.
Like those crinkle fries?
Oh, they're so terrible for you, but so good.
So gross. I said, no, we have an air fryer. We're going to cut up potatoes. He's like, oh, they just take so long though. And I said, I'm willing to wait. I'm fine. I also notoriously can eat things quite raw and don't care. Like I could eat things right out of the can without warming it up. It turns Dillon. So I cut up potatoes and put them in the air fryer. And they were pretty close to done. They were hot all the way through. But I didn't want to eat our cheeseburgers and then the fries. So I pulled them out. Dillon was he already said, I'm going to make myself a baked potato. Because it's faster and I don't want those fries. Whenever they're like a little al dente in the middle. Right? I didn't want that. And I said, fine.
You're making me sound like
Then
crazy.
I pulled out the fries and I put them in a bowl for me and our daughters because they thought they were fine too. They're just a tiny bit undercooked. We were dipping them in barbecue anyway, you couldn't tell. But he's like, that just really turns me. I just think it's so gross, but I'll eat it. And I said, no one has a gun to your head, Dillon. You don't have to eat these. My self-worth does not live and die or whether or not my husband eats the food that I make. I don't care. Like, he made the burgers, they were delicious. I made the fries, you don't like them, it's fine. Make your baked potato. Have something else. No, I'll eat it. I'm like, you literally just said you're going to throw up if you eat it. And he's like, no, I'll eat it. And I was like, you don't have to be, I'm really hitting a home here, but I was like, Dillon, you don't have to be a martyr. You don't need to eat these French fries. And these small occurrences from someone who comes from a pious debt, duty, obligation family with a martyr complex, these things happen 10 times a day. Of like, you don't have to do this for anybody. You're not obligated. Not everything is a responsibility. You don't have to chip off pieces of yourself. You're allowed to operate from a place of desire and joy. You're allowed to do that. So what I'm saying is, I think piety and debt, duty, obligation can be so beautiful, but we've all been there. I know I'm really rambling.
No, this is good. This is good.
We've all been there. We've been in a committee meeting. We've been at work with a group. We've had coworkers. We've had family members, whoever, where they'll do the favor for you, but you know they don't really want to, and there's resentment attached to it or annoyance attached to it. They don't really want to be there. And this is where the line gets tricky, because there are times in life where a friend asks you to pick them up from the airport and you love them, so you say yes. You don't want to be at the airport at 6 in the morning, but you do it. Of course, the line is there. But we all know the people where they always say yes, but you're never quite sure if their yes is just out of obligation. And anytime they do you a favor, it actually feels heavier, because they're operating from this place of piety, this place of debt, duty, obligation. And I really struggle with that. Same with, like, I think of church specifically, because this is a church podcast. If you are serving at church in any way, do it with a joyful heart, or don't do it at all, because nobody needs that energy there. Like, you don't do it because you feel like you have to and I'm obligated. Do it because you want to. And that doesn't mean that you have to want to be there all the time. You're like, yay, and be like perky. No, but do it because you're finding meaning in it somehow, not because you were told somewhere along the line that you have to, and then you're there and you're like, ugh. People can feel that. Even if you think you're hiding it, people can feel when you're just a yes person, but there's actually resentment attached to it. People can feel when you're eating nasty French fries and no one asked you to do that, but you're doing it anyway. For who? I don't know. But
right,
you're doing it anyway.
Yes, but that's
my
totally,
shtick on piety.
No, but that's not piety.
Debt, duty, and obligation, it's a part of piety.
Debt, duty, and obligation is, but
piety is you're doing something to appear loyal to a cause or a person, but it's not actually being loyal, and it's not actually helping that cause.
But I would say that
person.
could be, yes, you're
I think
correct.
that is piety.
Well, I think that's a perversion of piety.
It's the shadow side of
sure.
piety. It's
because
still piety.
Piety, yes, but piety at its root, when it is coming from a healthy place in one's life or the community, is when you are engaging in practices that are drawing you into a deeper connection with God and your neighbor.
Right, so let's break this down.
So if like I do a lot of the time, I hate to say it, I wish I could say that Samantha was using hyperbole about today's
French fries?
Today's array of our dinner situation, but she's not, and I'm embarrassed to say it, but it's true. I don't see that. So yes, that comes out of some of my upbringing of being a pious person and practicing piety to connect on a deeper level through acts of love and service to my family and my neighbor.
And denying any sense of self.
Yes, most definitely. But if I am just going about and doing things and complaining about them, but then trying to like make it better with like, oh, well, I'll eat it. That is what I said. That is not, that's just bad behavior.
But it is piety.
It's coming out. Yes, it's coming out of piety, but it's just bad behavior.
Right, it comes out of piety. It's not disconnected from piety. Piety is about denying self-interest, and it might begin with religious roots. People deny self-interest because they're told if you're in right relationship with God, then you give, you serve others. And those are beautiful things, to be clear. Those are beautiful things. But everything good has a shadow side. All light creates shadow, right? There's no personality trait that doesn't have it. I have those things too, of course. But, and I need to say this too. I know a few people who I would call pious, and they don't give off that debt, duty, obligation.
Oh, right. That's what I'm saying.
They are giving
and
quite selfless, and they are happy to be doing it.
I mean,
but I know other people who are giving, and you can tell it's like, oh, you you're afraid to say no because
I
you
mean,
think that makes you a bad person.
yeah, I mean, there's a sense of Christian piety, whether you do it as an individual or a group. There's a sense of Christian piety where I know a lot of people in like the Anabaptist tradition or the peace churches, like the Quakers and the Brethren and the Mennonites. They actually, not all of them, but a majority of them, because of peace and world harmony and connection, they care a lot about the earth. And so their piety, because they are a very, very strict pietistic tradition, they care about doing cleanups. Like they care about littering and recycling and trash pickup and all that kind of stuff because they see the earth, the world, as God's body. And God has given us this, so why would we pollute it? So it's out of their act of piety that they continue to do
Right.
cleanups. So
Right.
that is a very beautiful thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's when you start to complain like, oh, I have to get up every Saturday and do it. Well, that yeah, maybe you should take a break.
Right.
Or maybe you should regenerate in a different way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
So you see, I'm trying to defend piety because I was brought up with it. I am also aware that it's a beautiful tradition when it's done right.
Mm-hmm.
My hesitation with it these days is that it can be very detrimental to one's own
Sense of self.
sense of self, and that you can, if you take it too far, you could actually lose yourself. You have no idea who you are.
I think about Rob Bell.
You can lose yourself.
He was raised with piety, with debt, duty, obligation. Mm-hmm. He speaks about this extensively. Mental breakdown in his 40s, I think, of just this. He just kept going, trying to make his family proud, trying to do what he was told was right, which is give, go harder, give more of yourself to your wife, to your family, to your job, to the church. Go. Just give more of yourself. And then one day he's curled up in a ball shaking in his home office, and his wife finds him, and he's like having a breakdown because we were given an ego for a reason. You can't die to your ego till you first have one. So if from childhood you are taught you have to give, you have to be selfless, that's not developmentally appropriate. A child needs to build up their ego and have a sense of self, so later on spiritually they can die to that sense of self.
Well, right.
That is the way.
And pietism also, again, if not done in a healthy way, can how do I want to say this? It can drive one to always have to keep climbing the ladder. Mm-hmm. Okay, now I've done this, now I need to go to the next thing, now I need to go to the next thing, now I need to go to the next thing.
What makes it deeper is it's connected to God.
Yeah, it keeps you on the hamster wheel, where if you have a very inclusive understanding of God's grace, which the Lutheran Church, other churches do too. I'm not saying this, I'm not trying to be anti other denominations, but the Lutheran Church has a very, very upfront, central, inclusive understanding of God's grace. Well, that means that you're both a beloved child of God and also simultaneously or parallel, you screw up all the time. Yeah. So it's the parallel, it's the both and all the time. And so if you forget to do a little pietistic practice, God's grace is still there. God's loving embrace is still there. Yeah. So,
so 3 things that I hope I remember all of that come up for me, maybe in closing, I think, unless you have something else to say, is number 1, this piety really became individualized around the Enlightenment time.
Yeah.
Which makes sense because the Enlightenment, which really helped capitalism take root, it's whenever scientific thinking became a real thing.
Exploration.
And this is whenever we started to put emphasis on the individual rather than the community. That's the first thing. The second thing is we have to remember when we say we are saved, Jesus saved us, historically, what we are saying is Jesus died for speaking out against the Romans who were causing harm. And when Jesus died, the news of his death and resurrection, that story spread like wildfire, and people started to gather in these small communities, ecclesia, later known as church. They used to gather in these small communities of people, and when they were told the Roman emperor was their savior, they said, no, Jesus is my savior, and my salvation is found here in this ecclesia, in this community, in this later known as church, right? The community that gathered in Jesus' name is what salvation came through. Not through a personal, I knew Jesus, I know the story of Jesus, but through the community that gathered in and under the teachings of Jesus. I don't want to say in the memory of Jesus, but like with Jesus after his death. Do you know what I mean?
No, yeah.
That's where salvation was, because they took care of each other in death, in hunger, right? Because the emperor was not taking care of them. The emperor was enslaving them, was making them hungry, was taking their land, taking their livelihood, taking their home, taking their family members.
And also
triple taxation, all of it.
And
wait. So the last thing, wait. I'm going to lose it. Hold on. Debt, duty, obligation, piety. I don't know. The point that I'm making, though, is it's about community, not this personal, I'm holier than thou, I'm good enough. So it's about the posture. There was one more thing, but I lost it. So go ahead.
Oh, no. I just, like a lot of people, it's very common. Yeah, I mean,
remember.
Go ahead.
So, sorry. Piety, it makes me think of this, like, okay, so if we can be pious in community, it's not just about, am I doing the right thing personally? It's about the salvation moving through the community. It's about debt, duty, and obligation in a healthy way to the community. Father Richard Rohr, talks about this. He talks about it with Trinity and Spirit and everything, but he talks about a water wheel, if you know what a water wheel is.
It's always self-emptying
when
and
it spins,
filling.
it has water in these little like bucket things, and then it empties, and then it fills back up with that waterfall that comes down, and then it empties again. And I think that image is true of piety as well, or of debt, duty, and obligation, of this, like, it's a good thing to give and to have obligation, right? That's what relationship is. You need to. But also you need to have a sense of self and fill back up, or else you'll have nothing to give. So it's just this, like, emptying the water and filling it back up. And it's you fill it back up by knowing who you are and what you want.
Yeah.
And if you're constantly giving, there's nothing to fill up anymore. You don't know what it is that even fills you up. You don't, like, do you need alone time? Do you need to write? Do you need to go for a walk? Who are you? And what fills you up so that you can go and be pious?
Yeah.
Do you know, does that make sense?
No, I totally do. And I think of, yeah.
And give to your community of salvation is really what I think of piety as, of, like...
Yeah, the salvation. When someone says, Jesus died for our, usually it's our, you could say your, make it very personal, but for our sins. Sometimes one might look at that and they might think, like, oh, that's so ridiculous. But if you look at it from a different angle, and you look at it from a very historical angle of what like you just talked about, it actually makes a lot of sense, because sins, we think of sins so differently now, but it was the sin of things that were drawing people away from actual real connection, which was seen in feeding people and clothing people. Actually true incorporated communities that you saw in these early Jesus movements, and that was real, something real and tangible, but it was being done again in community. Also, really quick too, this idea of, like, love and connection in community, and kind of ridding one of, like, of sins. They weren't talking about, like, personal sins necessarily. Somewhat, yes.
They were talking about collaboration.
They were talking about collaboration for sins.
Empire.
Also, we have to realize too, when someone talks about salvation in the early Jesus movement, salvation, we also have to realize that Roman and Greek mythology, there was a major fear of death. Most people didn't get to a good place. Most people didn't get to Jupiter, which was their type of heaven. It was a very scary place. You were in fear of dying. And so when Jesus says that not only in this place will we see renewedness, But when you follow these ways, you also in the end you have this sense of peace.
Yeah.
So he wasn't only offering something, peace and community in the here, but also the hereafter.
That's good.
So, you know,
we're kind of out on a branch here. Are you ready to end? Like one
yeah,
short thing to say.
Pietism can be good and it can also be destructive.
Yeah. And we ended on a branch that's somewhat related but not, talking about death and the fear of death. And I just want to plug something really quickly. Right before this episode, I was listening to a podcast and I've been consumed by all of this. What's really interesting is my favorite poet, I think perhaps your favorite poet, Andrea Gibson. They died 3 or 4 weeks ago, and they are from Maine. We were in Maine when we found out that Andrea died.
Which is very ironic.
Yeah. And Andrea was diagnosed 4 years ago with cancer, and then was later told that it could not be cured, and they died out loud, if that makes sense. Andrea is one of the most beautiful poets of our time, and I think will be one of those poets where in 1,000 years we're still reading Andrea's work. And they died so publicly, not to say there weren't private moments, but spoke about it. And they decided to go into it and to be grateful for so much. I'm trying to explain it the best I can. But now they've died a couple weeks ago, and if you're in the poetry world like I am, the explosion of love for their wife and just the whole story is crazy. And what's so interesting is Andrea, even if you're not in the poetry world, there are people who I never even knew were into poetry at all, and like just maybe dabbled, but they know about Andrea. Andrea has kind of pulled the shades back on death.
Yeah.
In a way that we don't do in our culture. They wanted people to see, like this is part of it, right? It was just they died out loud is all. So if you're interested, Andrea Gibson, there's this poem you can go on YouTube. It's called A Letter from the Afterlife, and they read it to their wife Meg. And if you listen to that and don't cry, oh my goodness.
And between her reading or speaking the poem, I should say, and them speaking the poem, and the instrumental music, which
gets you.
So when someone reads their because I'm a lover of hymns, which is just poetry set to music, when someone reads their poetry and there is moving music behind it, almost brings me to tears. I mean, I just it is so deeply emotional and moving.
So it's not connected to piety.
Well,
maybe it is.
Well,
maybe it is.
In some way it is, because we are allowing their work to move us in a very deep way, in a connective way to our neighbor.
So turn this episode off in a minute when we're done. Go on to YouTube, look up Andrea Gibson, Letter from the Afterlife, and you will see it's Andrea and their wife Meg sitting on grass looking at each other. And Andrea has already been diagnosed with incurable cancer at this point and knows that they are dying. And reads this poem to Meg, and it's just one of the best poems I've ever heard. Also, if you're not a poetry person, I'll just leave you this one little tidbit. It's really interesting that we pull out poetry at weddings and funerals when it's like these big life moments. We're like, oh, I don't know what to do. I know, I'll read a poem. I'll bring a poem, because poetry touches a place that other words can't. Anyway.
And poetry, yeah, the poetry is very devotional.
Yes, there you go.
I know we don't like this, but it's very devotional, and devotional.
We were just talking about this morning.
Devotions, whether you like them or not.
We went to a bookstore, and it had it was a Christian bookstore, because we were picking stuff up for our church, and it had a lot of devotionals. And I told Dillon, like, I'm not really a devotional person. And he said, well, you read a lot of poetry, and it's like essentially the same thing. I'm like, yeah. Yeah.
Devotionals, poetry have a very deep connection to a pietistic way of living one's Christian life.
Yeah.
which is not a bad thing.
Yeah.
Just don't
All right.
overdo it.
Listen to Andrew's poem.
Yeah.
Be pious in the best way you can. After I just
this is
like, oh, I hate pietism.
This is a joke in our household. I always say, I shouldn't call her out, but I always call my mother a pious pilgrim.
Yeah.
A pious pilgrim.
When we first started dating, I used to call all of her shoes pilgrim shoes.
Yeah, well, they kind of are. I think
shoes.
I think every one of them has a buckle. But
true.
no, I love my mother dearly. But she is a pious pilgrim, and so every time I think about piety, I think of her. It's a beautiful thing. It really is.
Pietism is not bad.
Yeah. And so, as we say at the end of every episode, stay curious.
To understand